The EU hosted Jeffrey Sachs, an American economist, academic and public policy analyst known for his work on economic development, poverty reduction and sustainability. He's advised governments and international organizations, including the UN, on economic policies. Sachs played a key role in the transition of post-Soviet economies to market systems and was a leading advocate for the UN's Millennium Development Goals. Currently, he's a professor at Columbia University and directs the Center for Sustainable Development. This was an absolutely astonishing speech to watch. Here is an American who has been involved in European and American politics for years, and he goes to the seat of the EU Parliament and lambasts the US foreign policy since the fall of the Soviet Union and blasts the fecklessness of Europe in that same time period. He addresses the geopolitical landscape, focusing on the role of the United States in global conflicts, the lack of a coherent European foreign policy, and the ongoing war in Ukraine. He emphasizes the need for Europe to develop its own foreign policy independent of American influence and to engage directly with Russia to ensure long-term peace and stability. Sachs describes the US foreign policy as one driven by a firm belief in unipolarity and a desire to expand NATO eastward without considering the security concerns of other nations, particularly Russia. Sachs further discusses the historical context of NATO expansion, highlighting the promises made to Gorbachev about not expanding NATO eastward and how these were subsequently broken. Sachs explains the detail of all of these expansions and proclaims that everything the US says about this is a lie. The reality, he says, is that President Bill Clinton signed off on this approach of aggressive expansion in 1994. Sachs argues that this approach has led to unnecessary conflicts, including the war in Ukraine, which he believes could have been avoided through diplomacy and a recognition of Russia's security interests. From a long-term perspective, Sachs states that the goal was to block off Russia from the Black Sea. The idea was for both Ukraine and Georgia to eventually join NATO at the end of this project. There would be no end to the eastward expansion of NATO. With regard to the Ukraine war, Sachs predicts that the conflict will end soon, likely due to negotiations between Trump and Putin. But he stresses that lasting peace in Europe will require European initiative and a realistic approach to foreign policy that includes engaging with Russia. It is here where he prods the Parliament to encourage European agency in their own future. They will need to step in defence spending, as Trump has demanded, but also in vision and strategy. The presentation also touches on broader global issues such as the Middle East conflict and relations with China. One of the most interesting asides is the 7 wars approach the US took following 9/11. We've heard this before in various places over the past several years. Wesley Clark himself has talked about it openly. The US neocon faction, Wolfowitz, Cheney and others, were committed to conflict in Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, Libya and Sudan. These efforts started under Bush and carried on through the Obama administration. Trump effectively ended this madness in his first term, and then Biden was bogged down in Ukraine. Sachs claims that these 7 wars were very much the design of Netanyahu and Israel, as well as the US foreign policy apparatus. Charitably, we can call this shocking presentation less US bashing and more of a focus on the need for Europe to redefine its role in the world and to prioritize diplomacy and peace over warmongering and subservience to US interests. In summary, this is one of the more blunt, provocative and controversial presentations ever given at the EU Parliament. In previous years or decades, we might have thought of this as subversive or anti-American. Today, with the awakening underway following the removal of the USAID mask, we might just call it truth. The pod score 5 of 5 mics, the pod score 5 of 5 mics.